You reckon?
Yeah. Because, well, this is my opinion, of course, not fact, but it's just their game was born, I'm not going to say 10 years ago, but 10 years ago is when it really sort of blew up in terms of youth football and proper coaching investment started slowly. So they've only ever really had, it's a really young game, if that makes sense, women's football. So they've only grown up in the era of technical coaching and technical players and technical, whereas even now, if you look at like what we're producing with Foden and the England setup and whatever, we've still got that stigma a little bit there, and that physicality is still sort of used. And do you know what I'm trying to say? Them old habits die hard almost.
Yeah, you know, I'm 27. You're what? Same age as me, I think.
I'm old. I'm 31.
So in that same sort of bracket, though, realistically. And I know when I first done my football leaders at 16, so that's about 11 years ago, I was given a DVD at the end of it. And I've still got that DVD, but that's only 11 years ago. I remember like the practice design and being on like my sessions and stuff. We were watching Kes the film, and there was a big clip on that. We watched that for a little bit, and just when you look at some of the components of the training courses now, they're so different compared to back then. So I was so lucky in a way that I was on the very back end of the way education changed for coaches as I started.
Yeah, and that's obviously for me as well. It's what like where I was sort of when I started my football career, if you want to call it that, 16, 17, coming out of youth football into adult football, it was so physical in terms of like everything was about being hard, that, if you went down, don't stay down for long, it's weak, you look weak. And now it's the opposite, isn't it? Stay down, make sure you get the foul. It's so different. And that's why I think that's what I'm trying to say with the women's game. It's been born out of into a technical world, more tactical based in terms of smarter players. And I think that's why you see most women's teams when they play, majority of it is fast, two-touch football. And, it's good. It's a good thing, but it's different.
And I think you can see the difference when you go into an environment where, I've coached a lot of academy football and grassroots, and then I've gone into high school football. We've taken on a team at high school. Then you've got players within there, and then those players, you're like, come on, quick, 1-2 touch, move fast. Yeah. And they're struggling with that. And I think that's the difference when you go from one environment into another. And when you take that technical side and see players who aren't technically there as well. Yeah,
that's it. And I think because sometimes, especially in boys and men's, the stronger players just dominate. Well, I don't think you have that in women's as much. It's the quicker ones. Yeah. Hello, Jordan.
Yeah. Hello, gents. You right?
Yeah, good, mate. You right?
Yeah, apart from this laptop, I could.
We've all been there with technology, mate. Don't worry.
Yeah, it's not great, is it? But nice to meet you, Phil.
Yeah, it's nice to piece you both together because, we've been chatting to both of you on different routes and stuff. So
I had a place to the name, but
Jordan's based up in Chelmsford. So how far away are you from Phil then, Jordan?
2.5 hours, 3.
Yeah, you're like London way.
Yeah, I'm near. Yeah, I'm near Colchester, actually.
Oh, my sister
was Chelmsford, that sort of way, but now Colchester way, yeah. So Essex.
Right, yes. Yeah, my sister's there, so I know it. Funny. Small world, eh, Jordan?
Yep.
There you go. Brilliant.
I was literally looking on the map, George, yesterday. I was like, oh, wow, I'm 4 hours away from you. I didn't realise that I was that far away from you.
Yeah, that is a bit scary, isn't it? I suppose it's not too bad, though. It's got to happen one day, Luke, that we all just meet up all together,
Yeah,
absolutely. We're literally like sort of on a one route stop. So you could start with Jordan, go to Phil, and then me, or vice versa, for example. Like if you wanted a route does work out that way, but it is definitely in the planning stages as our next phase.
Yes, sounds a plan.
I'm waiting for the reflective podcast sort of convention or conference. I'm looking forward to that.
That'd be wild cool. Yeah, it'd be great, especially with some of the American coaches I've been speaking to. They could host us and pay for flights over. That wouldn't be too shabby.
Oh, yeah. That'd be nice.
Oh, nice.
So it's good to see you boys. Obviously, we both recorded different types of episodes each and different series. So Jordan's on the Unsung Heroes Series and Phil's on the Coaching Insight Series. So this actually features part of a third different series, which is the Reflective Circle. So it's nice to record the second episode and bring the boys together, especially from a youth and women's phase and adult game into reserves and youth and adult in terms of what Jordan's done with his community background, and then sort of me with a grassroots academy and a youth level as well. So it's good to mix these together. It's good to bring it. So as said, it's going to be agreement at times, perhaps a little bit of a debate, whether you've got opposing views, but that's what it's all about, and that's what's going to give the learners some good insight. But if we start with Phil, then, to give yourself a bit of an introduction, seeing as you're the mastermind behind what you do every day, great start with you.
So obviously Phil Sargent says on the screen. Great introduction from Luca there. So I'm a UFC qualified coach. That's my level I'm at in my badges. I've done various other sort of experiences like PSV Eindhoven the other month, as you know. And so really still learning quite early in my sort of coaching. It's been about 5 years now. But I'm quite lucky, really. I get to coach men's first team and women's first team. And I also get to dabble into sort of the youth of both genders as well. So I feel like I get a good, nice, broad sort of experience. And it's really, really helped me develop as a coach.
And Jordan, your introduction, seeing as you're the one who brings a lot to the table in terms of spirit, that human side, and having a bit of time out from the game as well.
Yeah, that's right. So, like Phil, level 2 or UEFA C qualified. I've done coaching since I left, sixth form college, which was, oh, blimey, how many years? 24 now. So 9 years ago, I started doing my coaching. Done different levels from grassroots, had the opportunity with youth sides with Chelmsford, worked with a reserve side at step 7, and just as you say, Phil, always eager to learn and see what coaching brings, because it's a really beautiful thing to do and it's so rewarding, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, just to add to that, Jordan, I think it's quite a good metaphor, football for life. I think we might be seeing the Ted Lasso quote there, but it's definitely true, isn't it? The ups and downs, the hard work, all of it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You feel every emotion going. It's fastening in for a roller coaster, but I think that's it with football. With one thing, you think you've overcome one emotion, then another emotion comes, and then another one comes. I mean, how do you even deal with that? That's what I'd like to know, because I feel like I just on that roundabout constantly. I don't know about you guys.
Luca, go first.
So I feel I'm more on a bit of a wave compared to a roundabout. So I know what you feel, mate. So I'm sort of in the same boat as you. I'm having a bit of time out from football at the moment because I'm teaching full time and I'm studying. So I've got a year left to study. So this time next year I'll practically be done. So for me, I wanted to step back a little bit between teaching, studying, doing a podcast and coaching. Something had to give for me. So I'm a bit on that wave where I'm like, do you know what? I really miss being on the grass. I love just, the smell of it, being out there and especially that side of things. And then I'm like, I really want to get back into it. And then I'm like, do you know what? I'm so glad I don't have to get up for coaching at like 7 o'clock this morning, especially after a week of teaching. And I'm like, some of the games on a Sunday, I don't miss traveling. So I'm on that wave with you as well, where that emotion kicks in, where I'm really passionate to get back into it, but I'm actually a little bit glad to have a bit of a breather and a bit of space out of it. So I'm on that emotional wave as you are as well with it. But I think that love for it is there. And I was having this discussion with my best mate the other day, and he's in teaching as well. And he's like, do you know what? We're both at that stage where we both teach. We have a good a period of time coming up, which is going to be off for us. It's a nice sort of life to have in teaching when you're away from the stressful side of it. And he's like, do you know what? This is the point we've always planned for. And I was like, and he was talking about getting back into football. And he's like, I don't actually know whether I want to get back into football. And I was like, mate, I'd love to see you go back and whatever. And then he sort of had the same discussion with me about his side. But I said, mate, if someone come to me tomorrow and said, give up teaching and you're going to be in football full time, you're going to be having late nights, you're going to be traveling, stressed, you're going to be on the weekends, you're going to be out in the wet weathers, but you've got a guaranteed full-time coaching job, I said, mate, I would jump ship in a second. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah, mate, because that's how much I love the game and that's what I would do to it. So that's where I am with it. So that's sort of my insight. What about you, Phil?
I think it's sort of the analogy I try to use these sort of questions is I kind of view my coaching as like a train journey. And not every destination on your train journey you want to get off at, but sometimes you get forced to, and doesn't mean you have to stay off there. You can get back on the train and move forward again. But the key thing is that you're always moving forward. There's always the next destination. And I just think that's so important to embrace it, you know. And it's not easy, but that's why, like I said before, it's a bit of a metaphor for life. And the best part about coaching is there's always that next opportunity, that next chance, that next game, the next training session. And I think that's what makes it so great, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, Phil. I think that you always want to strive. It does run parallel from life and football. You want to strive for perfection, but then each week there's something else that brings up that you want improvement. And that's another reason that is so well. It just brings so much fulfillment. So yeah, I totally. But I love that analogy. What you're saying about a train journey. I really like that.
Welcome, mate. Steal it, take it, copyright it.
Top man.
It's all right.
So just to touch upon that, George, I know you're out of football and you're having that time out for some reasons which I'm not sure if you wanted to share them or whether you want to keep them more closer to you. But as you're sort of having this time out from football, is there sort of a return on the horizon at any point where you can see it coming back, whether that be on your own time frame or whether it's sort of planned or whether there is a date in sight, etc.?
Oh, no pressure.
It's up to you how you answer it, mate. It's up to you.
No, I think to be fair, when I was getting in for Swindon Fins and doing for stuff for grassroots with Ivory, doing the youth work with Chelmsford, and yeah, I suppose doing the reserves with Dunmo. I think with the reserves with Dunmo, it was a great experience, but it was so intense. It was back to back to back to back, you know, always on for go. I think at the start I suppose, though I had to do it for health reasons that I had to stop. I was glad that I think it was the right time to have taken the break because of the health reasons. And that might be I say a cop out. I don't know if that's the right way of putting it. But I needed time to focus on getting myself right, and I've used this time resourcefully to try and get myself back physically fit, but also mentally fit, because that transpires in for all with coaching and management, as you guys know. I can't give my full 100% best to any individual or team if I'm not 100% with it. Low it was the right time. For time is getting on now that I suppose pre-season's starting, and I'm starting to get that buzz that you get inside that you feel like, oh, I really need to get back involved now.
Yeah, it's
because
like a calling.
it's like been a big part of my life, I suppose. And I just I'm ready for that opportunity. But then part of my mind again is, right, if it's a season, what's the season going to entail? How intense is it going to be? And I suppose it might be a measured approach coming back, Luca, in a sense of that I gradually build myself up again. But I know that again, that's not the best way about going about it. So time, I don't know. I'm hoping next season, but we'll just see what happens.
And I don't think you should feel bad for taking time out for yourself, mate, especially what you've been through, and, you know, especially how deep it is in terms of the actual illness which you've experienced, but also that mental health side as well. So I don't think you should feel any sort of pressure to come back. I don't think you should feel bad about taking time out. I think it's all about you have to put yourself first, the way that you've always put your players first as well. So I think it's such a fascinating sort of mindset that you had there, the way that you spoke about that time out from the game and the way that you've portrayed your feelings about that.
I think you learn about yourself. I mean, I remember that. I mean, I've even heard other people say about this, but football used to literally dictate my life. You know, I was always on the phone, always replying to emails, calls from, you know, if it was parents or even if it was players for reserves that needed a guiding hand. It's part of a duty that it's not just for training side of things. It's not just for match day situations. It's behind the scenes as well, and helping each individual find themselves somewhat. And devoted time. It's unsociable hours, but it's worth it because you see so much growth and development in an individual when it all goes well. But that's if they're putting for obviously they've got to put the graft in. And a lot of young lads, young girls as well, that are wanting to develop now to help themselves be a better person, and that's going to stead them well in life, as we've said before in our podcast, Luca. That you know, if I can help one person, I feel satisfied. But it's bringing it all together to help as a team, because I want to set my ethos is to try and help them with their way in life as well.
Can I just, without sounding like a cliche machine here again, with another analogy or whatever, but when you're on an airline and they're doing the safety procedure, they always say put your own mask on first before you put anyone else's on. And I think that's quite, again, a little bit of a metaphor for life. You need to put your mask on first before you can start helping others. You know, I've used that before with other people. We're not going to go into the names and stuff, but people I spoke to on mental health and stuff, and that's what I always say to them, because that's what I taught myself when I went through mental health problems when I was younger. And for me, once you can start being you and being the best version of you, and that's when you start to pass on that energy and stuff to other people. So there's nothing wrong with getting yourself right, getting yourself in the right place, because then the people around you are only going to benefit from that.
I think, yeah, it's just, excuse me, I find that, to be fair, it got to one stage. Well, I say one stage. It came to twice, and I suppose this was in for last mainly. One was about 5 years ago when I had to go through for cancer treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was one time, even before that, when I was going through mental health stages. And both times doctors said to me, coaching, it might bring you, help you and everything like that. And it may help others, but give it up, because it's not doing you any good favors at the moment, because it's doing you all sorts of distractions with your mental health and your physical health. And I used to say, well, it's also, I'd like to use that as a distraction for myself. But then, as you say, it's not helping others. And I've realized that now, that I was going through stages where I was actually, that I should have listened to their advice. It wasn't right for me at that moment in time. But until you sit back and, I suppose, digest things that have happened over for years, you think, yeah, they've got a point. Maybe I should have stopped, But I had that comment of, you should actually give it up, and not just like for 1 or 2 months. I was saying give it up fully. And that came from particularly one consultant. And to be honest with you, I got so irritated when he told me that. I won't say the exact word for word, but I said, go and effing do one, because you don't know how much it brings satisfaction in so many ways, and that's what I said to him. It's like me saying to you, if you've done years of training being a doctor and you're helping patients get better, if you've had to stop because of episodes that's happened in your life, that will do you harm as well. Yeah. So I was trying to put into a perspective for him, and he said to me at the time, well, you don't have to be like that and everything like that. But I was like, well, don't walk somebody else's shoes. You don't know what everyone else is going through.
And when it comes to, that reaction in terms of saying to him, you can do one, because it brings you on that joy in a way that it could take your mind away from, the harsh realities of life, because you can lose yourself being on the pitch. Even though he said that to you, and although now you're having time out because of your health sort of situation, do you ever reflect and think, I actually want to walk away from the game for the best of me, regardless of whether he said it to me or not? Or is it, I want to go back at some point, and that's going to be when I decide?
I think it's just, I want to go back, but just when the time is right. And I suppose there's been times where there's opportunities that have come up, but I've had to knock them on the head. And to be honest, with even on a mental state of affairs, that's hurt my soul. But again, I've had to do it respectfully and gracefully for the interests of that club or team that have put things forward to me. That it's not right because I wouldn't be doing the club any favours. And that again, the first few days, you think, oh, like, okay, I've just said that. But when you leave it months and months and you think, should I have been bold enough to have taken a risk? But then only time, hindsight's a wonderful thing, as they say, pardon for cliche. But I couldn't have done it for the team because it wouldn't have been fair on the team or for players or anyone involved with the club. I want to, when I'm back, I'm ready, I'm hungry. But one thing that I'm going to say is that I know football can be quite volatile at times, but I just hope that there's a bit of patience out there, that it gives me a bit of time to find my feet in there again and not to feel so pressured in getting things done in such a timely fashion. So.
And just to build upon that then, from your experiences, Phil, in terms of what you do in the women's game and men's coaching from the youth levels, that volatility that you may experience or may have seen, how do you find those situations and how do you sort of manage them when they do arise?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the FA launching various campaigns over the years, especially recently. I'm not sure about everywhere in the UK, but definitely in our sort of county, our FA have definitely launched more campaigns to sort of protect referees, which isn't exactly getting rid of the whole problem, but it's, in my opinion, one of the biggest sort of influences, referees and decisions. As we know, there's a lot of emotion in the game, and obviously refereeing decisions affects that. But yeah, generally, I think it's got way better. It's still not where it needs to be. But the biggest way I try to diffuse situations personally, and every player that sort of plays for me will know this, is by using humour, which there's kind of been a defence mechanism my whole life in every area of my life. But I always try and have a bit of fun, if that makes sense of it, and try and not take the mick out of someone, because that's obviously going to escalate it, but try and almost diffuse it with a bit of humour, with a bit of a joke, try and break the tension. But I think sometimes there's not much you can do other than stand up for yourself, stand up for what's most importantly morally right. I've had incidents. We had a 16-year-old women's player. Their manager was doing the line, which is fair enough, like volunteer. I understand he's probably quite stressed. She just appealed for it, an offside. Against an offside, saying, "Look, can you explain who was off there?" Because all she was trying to do is get an explanation. And he just started effing and blinding her. I said, "Mate, you can't be doing that. She's 16 years old." I was like, "Oh, I didn't know she was 16. I went, even if she isn't 16, it doesn't matter. I'm just letting you know that, by the way." And to be fair to him, it kind of snapped him out. Like, I've never seen anyone just change up like that. He was like, "Oh," it's like I shocked him. And he was like, straight away, really apologetic. And to be fair to him, again, after the game, came up to us, again, really apologetic. But it just showed that you could see the real person once he sort of snapped, if that makes sense, out of that football competitive male aggression, almost, you want to call it that, into the real him, if that makes sense. And it was a real learning curve for me, because I was thought to myself, how many times have I reacted with anger or aggression myself in sort of a protective fight or flight response, when actually, if I just, like I said, use more humor or try to diffuse the situation, you see the real person come out.
And I think when you talk about humor, that's an approach which I use for my students every day, is take that humor and how can we de-escalate a situation from the way that we approach and have that conversation with them. So when they're feeling quite distressed and they're quite irate from a certain situation, sometimes the best thing for us is to use that humor just to reassert the fundamental sides of them in terms of what they see as the positives, and then we can try and build upon that situation, de-escalate, and then reach around back to that situation. So it's a similar approach in terms of what you do. And I think rather than going toe-to-toe with someone at the best of times, especially when situations are heated in football and especially when emotions are really high, we want to avoid that conflict to try and make that positive environment. And I think the importance is trying to navigate away from an escalation of a situation to try and manage it on a positive level.
Yeah. The thing about conflict is you can't avoid it and you need it. in some regards. Now, I'm not saying, of course, abuse and that. No, don't tolerate that. It should be zero tolerance in every. Well, the FA say that. Whether they back it up with in certain lights, I'm not going to go down that sort of route. But you do need conflict in areas in terms of your team and stuff, because, and I believe this wholeheartedly, without conflict, because conflict creates friction, and you need friction to move. Without friction, you're going to be stood still. So you do need bits of conflict, because that's part of being a human and part of being in a group of humans. But it's how, like you say, you manage that conflict and what type of conflict it is. And I think, again, like you say, the really important part there was where you said looping back round to the problem, not just the humour element of diffusing it and then we move on like it never happened. No, now it's all calm. Let's talk our way through it, because that's how you stop it repeating. Whereas, and I've been guilty of this myself sometimes, sometimes I didn't want to deal with it maybe, or I've just forgotten genuinely, because as we all know and we spoke about, you're so busy, especially in grassroots. There's so much going on. There's actually, you might forget to go back to it, and then you see it rise again and it rears its head, and then you realise, okay, right, I've really got to nip this in the bud now. And the best thing, like everything, is just getting people talking and diffusing it that way.
Yeah, and that's I see what you're saying there, definitely. No, I think that's it. I think with, again, it runs what we're saying earlier, wasn't it, gents, is that life runs parallel with football. And I always used to say that it's sort of reverse psychology in a sense. I think talking is very important, absolutely. But if people used to roll up, say any teams that we had, we used to just say, just keep doing what you're doing, and we can have the last laugh at the end of the day. Because we're for better people, that's what we try and nurture on. I think that's it. It's as you say, I think talking is such a powerful tool, and I think this is it as well, is that communication is so underrated. When I say it's so underrated in football, I don't think people communicate effectively well enough, if you know what I mean, within football, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the best coaches do that. They don't. I think that's what, when you look at the best coaches, not just we talk about like Pep and Guardiola, Pep and Klopp and all these coaches, and they are brilliant communicators. But I think even in grassroots levels, sort of underappreciated coaches, some of the ones I've come across, their communication is just fantastic. The way they talk, the way they can walk into a room and they can straight away sense what's needed for that room and communicate to that room. And I think they're the best people. The way you can do that, I think that's how you get the best out of every group you go into and the individual within the group. So yeah, definitely agree with that, Jordan. I think, like you say, when we talk about communication and coaching, like you pointed out there, most of the time we're talking about, right, you need to talk to your teammates in a sense of on the pitch, give them information, man on, them type of things, which, yeah, of course they're relevant and they're important. But like you said, how often do we promote the other side of it, where it's actually you need to communicate as people?
Yeah, it's steering them in for the right path, I suppose. And that's what our duty is to steer them in for the right path. Yeah, got no more to add really, but yeah, definitely.
Just to steer the conversation, building upon what you both say there, is how we steer them in the right path and try and take them in the right direction. We're also looking at the campaigns which are introduced in terms of grassroots football. So when you talked about the referee situation, it made me think of a recent situation which has cropped up here in Wales. So it's great because we got two opposing views here, or views in terms of how the game is run in England and how it's run here in Wales. So what we've just introduced is the yellow card system. So we got a blue card, sorry. So the blue card will go along the yellow and the red card. So a blue card is a sin bin essentially for a period of time. You might be out for 10 minutes of the game and then you come back into it. And if you accumulate a number of blue cards, you're going to pick up a fine over the period of the season. Now, this is the first season that's been introduced. It's not gone down very well in terms of grassroots coaches and their viewpoints towards it, because they feel it's going to delay the game. It warrants the referee having more control over the players. They feel that it's more of a money-making exercise than having a period of time where it's going to change the game. Now, for us, we're very lucky because our CEO here in Wales is very forthcoming. He has a great viewpoint in terms of how the game should be played, and he wants to really change the game, and he's taking that hands-on. Now, we're not at the levels where the English FA are at the moment. We're not as big in terms of the Welsh FA compared to them. We don't have as many centres. We don't have the infrastructure like England has. So when it comes to us, it's more of a community feel here in Wales at the moment, and how we drive and take that forward is going to especially change over the years to come. But what are your thoughts in terms of the introduction of a blue card system and how players are managed and react towards this, as well as whether it's a good viewpoint to bring into the game?
Jordan, do you want to go first, or
Up to you, mate.
no? Go on, I'll let you go.
Okay. So, Luca, to be fair, I can't remember how many years ago this was, about 2, 3 years ago, it must have been. But I went on to a sin bin training here in Essex, and they didn't say, I don't think, about a blue card at the time, but they
No.
did mention something along the lines of that if you use like a yellow card and then like you can use a yellow card for a foul, but then yellow card for abuse or whatever, that's part of a sin bin. And you're thinking, well, that makes no sense whatsoever because it's the same sort of colour card as you're going to, so how's that going to? And there was a lot of people that was at the event and they was like, I'm getting really confused. How are we meant to follow this as such? Blue card, yes, would definitely, I agree. I think it would make it more identifiable, if you like. But I mean, even with Simbin, I mean, I'm going to put in perspective to throw to you guys for us coaches. If you're in a grassroots manner, if you get sent or shown a blue card, where can you go to Simbin? Because all I get told is I'll go get sent to the car park. What's that going to do? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, we've had it for 4 years, 4 years. I think similar timeline to what you said, Jordan. And it has been used, but very fleeting. I mean, we had one this year in the cup away. A lad I think it was like the 89th minute, got a 10-minute sin bin. So obviously that was the end of the game for him. He was basically sent off. But he'd already on a yellow. But like Jordan said, they use a yellow and they point to their watch in our league, so it means sin bin. But he thought he got a second yellow and got sent off, which then alienated him more. But then the ref was trying to explain to him, no, you're not sent off, but you can't come back on. So it just became a massive confusion of he has only got one yellow, but he's off, but he can't come back on because there wasn't enough time. And it just delayed the game and it was a mess. I haven't really seen it implemented much, like I said, and I haven't seen it implemented well. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think the blue card thing is brilliant for the Welsh FA, and hopefully the English FA will follow because, like Jordan said, it'll make it so much more clear, especially that situation. But my only real problem with it, I think it's good when you've got 3 referees. We only really get one in most of our, because with the referee shortage. So the problem I found that refs don't want to use it for when I spoke to them. They don't really want to use it as much because how are they meant to try and, let's say that, you've got a big bust up on a corner or something. You got 3 players that you put in a sin bin. You got to try and keep track of it. And then 2 minutes later, there's another one in the sin bin. So now the referee's trying to work out how long's gone for each player while trying to referee the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's more added pressures for them, isn't it, really? For the referee.
And I think these ideas are great, and I back it to the hilt. But it's as always, I just feel, and I can't comment on the Welsh FA, of course, but from RFA, with most things, the ideas are really good, but how they implement them is the issue.
It's definitely interesting what you say about a referee, trying to. He's got all these stakeholders around it. He's got 22 players on the pitch. He's got coaches, and then he's got spectators within that. And then he might, if he's very lucky, have a linesman that is there to make a decision as well or support him. But if he's there trying to point to his watch and say this is indicating a sin bin, how many different ways is that going to be taken, especially in terms of how that player reacted? And it's not very clear, especially on a wider pitch. If you're viewing from an angle, okay, you might be a spectator, but your angle of it is going to be very different. Oh, did he really point with his watch? And then those pressures come up because then the coaches are being rolled up from it, and then that's how you start to create a volatile situation because it's not very clear. And although there might be a guideline and framework, a guideline and framework is all very different until you're in the middle of the pitch and you're getting that abuse hurled at you. And to build on your point there, Jordan, when you're getting sent off to a car park, I remember I was with a coach once. She literally started out on a coaching journey. She was 21, 22. She wasn't majorly confident in terms of handling conflict or those volatile situations, and she wasn't really confident approaching games because she hasn't ref many games. So I think it was only a second or third game into it, and I was there watching the game. And this one bloke, he must have been, a 6 foot about 6 foot or so. He was, must have been mid-40s, something around that, and just kept hurling abuse at her, hurling. And it got to a point where she actually sent him off. Now, the same is the situation is there. He would be sent off to the car park. Now, that's all good. He's sent off for maybe half hour of a game. But when she leaves the match and gets into her car, what's the car park going to do? Because he's going to approach her in that situation and actually confront her away from a safe avenue in a car park, maybe after a game when it's later, when it's darker, it's later in the day, and all these certain situations crop up, and it's not a great situation to be in. I remember just losing myself on the sideline with him because it's like, you're actually treating a coach like this, you're treating a young female, you're treating a referee, and all these elements don't add up to it. And I took myself off because I was like, I can't be in this situation because I'm feeling myself getting emotional from it. And the coach I was supporting at the time was like, no, you've got no reason to stand over with the over on that side of the pitch. I was like, I think it's best that I do, because the referee, I support the referee in this situation, but she now has to take control of this and take what I've said as confidence to sort of build on, right, she's got control of the game. And I think it was just that situation which she was presented. And although these frameworks are in place, they don't navigate what the outcomes are during that moment at a time.
Yeah, I think that's it as well. Like, I mean, as you say, all them things that you guys have said, I totally agree with. And there's no, as you say, there's no protection from them even after the game, because it's still going to happen. I think I'm sure it was Essex FA that brought it in this season, I believe. Could be other counties, but I'm not too sure. But they've started bringing body cameras in. Now, I think that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong, but I do find that's good for a safety net. But I still find that quite a sad state of affairs, unfortunately, that poor old referees have to use something like that to make them feel safe.
Yeah, I agree. I think the bigger problem for me, and George touched on it there, is the deterrence to stop this. And there was a team in our league, division below us. It was nothing to do with us, but it was highlighted. They have to tell us, with all the FA transparency and all that. And their team literally, essentially, threatened to kill a ref. Like, obviously, how far they would have gone, I don't know. They were giving him death threats and stuff after the game, waiting for him in the car park, like you described, Luca. He's a full-grown man, but he's on his own. And he literally, one of my mates that I used to play with, played for the other team. And he actually, in the end, most of them lads stayed with the ref and then got the ref into his car and then just to protect him. And that team, not only they got I think 3 players had like a fine, but not banned, nothing. And I just can't get my head around it. I'm like, it needs to be zero tolerance. Get rid of these people out of football. Yeah, right, you can't stop them coming to watch, but eventually they're going to get bored of just watching. Do you know what I mean? It's just, for me, the FA give it this talk of, again, the English FA, that we're zero tolerance, we're against this, we're against that, we're against this. But yet these people are allowed year in, year out to keep playing at levels of football and nothing's done about it. And then you've got kids watching, other people watching, who are then thinking, oh, well, that's okay then, because there's no sort of, repercussions for it. So that's how you should act, so you can win a game of football. It's ridiculous.
No, I totally agree, because I mean, we had that when I was with Chelmsford first season, under 17s. We had a team that we played, and it all started with the lad that got, if you liked, it was a defending corner, and one of our lads was literally flicked like that behind his ear, and it caused a reaction. Now, with that, it just kicked off massively. But the thing is that we didn't start for a reaction, but the opposition that we had at the time, they started accusing us of saying, well, you guys initiated it and all this and all that, like. And you think, well, hold on a second. And then he was like, the coach for that team was trying to get his team off for their safety, and yet it wasn't us that initiated the situation. And as you say, people like that bring it down on a negative level, I suppose, it it becomes that's, I suppose, with them sort of conflicts, it's something we're not drilled into enough, even as coaches. How do we deal with that as coaches? Maybe it's something that should be brought into grassroots football, with younger ages, of could they how do you diffuse a situation if teams kick off?
Yeah, definitely.
And just building upon that, this is a recent clip that's cropped up in terms of the game here in Wales, and it's made quite a lot of viewing, to be honest. I just want your views and opinions on this in terms of what happened recently, a game in Wales, not actually far from me. So this is the young linesman. He's 16, I believe he was, and he has literally been decked out during the game by the opposition referee. So just to play it again, he's literally the linesman of the game. This coach is in his 50s, and that's his reaction to one of the linesmen not making a decision that he's wanted to make during the game. So that was unreal scenes when that was making its rounds literally 2 weeks ago, or just a little bit longer than that. What would your initial thoughts be on it, Phil, if you were, the governance of a national governing body?
I mean, it's just, what could that lad have possibly done or said to provoke that reaction? Obviously, we only see that part of it, but unless he's punched him first, I just don't see how there's any need, whether he's 16, 32, 21. Don't wrong, 16 still makes it even worse, but you can see my point. There's no age where suddenly it's acceptable. And straight away, there needs to be made an example of. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's disgusting. There's no room for it. If he gets away with that, then what is that message is that sending every single person, the players? I mean, he's in charge. I mean, that was a 16-year-old on the line, so I'm assuming it's probably an under 17s, under 18 setup. He's in charge of young men who have got their whole lives ahead of them. Like we said before, we're not just here to coach them football. We're here to guide them in life as well. We're, for some kids, we're the only male role models they have. And it's just disgusting that he's allowed to even be part of a football club. And again, I get you can't vet everyone and fully background check and make sure these people are right. I see loads of people in my time that I've looked at and gone, they shouldn't be coaching football. They're the exact problem. They're the problem with football because it's hard to get volunteers. But the minute you cross that line and do something like that, it has to be zero tolerance, mate. It has to be lifetime ban, not allowed any footballing activity. I mean, I'm talking about even just going to football games, and it might sound extreme, but it's the only way we're going to combat it, in my opinion.
Same page, George?
Yeah, good shout, Phil. And I mean, I look on that as well, and I think, well, you wouldn't even get away with doing that on the street, would you? Like in everyday life, you'd be done up for GBH.
Yeah.
So I think action does need requiring. And yeah, it as you say, it just hopefully doesn't set off a worrying trend, really.
And I think that's what's needed is that zero tolerance approach, lifetime ban, and then reassure everyone what the game is going to look like, especially if you've introduced a new framework and guidelines in terms of a sin bin and how that looks. But then there has to be a zero tolerance for when these things happen, because, again, what use would be a blue card in that situation? There wouldn't be any. So I think that's the situation on it. And just to build upon that guideline and framework, which really does come into place, but to navigate the conversation in a slightly different way and look at some personal coach development. Since we've last spoke, Phil, how much has your coaching practice changed or developed?
Wow, a lot. It's been 18 months, is it? Correct me if I'm wrong, Luca.
Yeah.
A lot. I think this season's been really tough for the women's side and the men's. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is, you've got to stick through it in the tough times. And one thing that I really regret this season is I changed my style of play at one point, and I went against my principles. And I think that's one of the biggest things for me in my growth lately, that no matter what's going on, sort of stick to them principles. And I don't think that just applies to tactics and the way, you set your team up. I think even at times I've come away maybe from my usual sort of tact in terms of man management and stuff. And it just didn't work. And I was essentially not being true to myself, which players see that, whether it's conscious or unconsciously, they kind of sense it. And that's probably the biggest growth. And, don't get me wrong, I've been studying as much as I can, doing CPD, doing all the things that we all do to try and improve ourselves as coaches, from the footballing side and the education. But from a sort of self-development point of view, being true to myself and knowing myself, I think is the biggest thing the last sort of 18 months. Probably more the last 6, if I'm being really honest, 6, 7. But out of the 18, that's probably the biggest learning curve, if that makes sense, the biggest effect it's had on my coaching.
And when you say you find yourself a little bit more and you've been working out on terms of that reflection and that learning that has taken place, how have you been able to learn more about yourself? What is it that you've done to do that?
I think the biggest thing is ask for more feedback from sort of players, and we use the word staff here. Maybe not staff in the the Premier League sense, but definitely in terms of the other coaches that I coach with. The first thing I do, for example, we had a midweek game the other week, and I did a halftime team talk, and it was a bit of a hairdryer, I won't lie. And the first thing I did was, the players went back on and stuff, I turned to my assistant manager and said, right, feedback. He was like, now? I was like, yeah, I want feedback. I want your raw emotion now with it, because if we wait, I'm not going to get your instinctual answer. Give me your answer now. Mm. And he said, and he gave me feedback when it was you everything perfect. He said, yes, you were aggressive, but you didn't do it in a way that was horrible. You did it in a way that was assertive. And straight away I was like, great, okay, great feedback, thank you. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. Again, 2 days later, we reflected again. So now there's no emotion involved, and we had the same answer. So for us, it was that conclusive evidence of in the moment, how you feel your emotions, which are really important. Sometimes I think we all get a bit scared of our emotions. You need to embrace them. But equally then, 2 days later, when you've got more, let's say, of a level head, there's no game going on, there's no result. It's all happened in the past. You can only go forwards. Okay, does it align? Yeah, okay, then we've got it right. Regardless of result, regardless of all that, that's how you know you've done it right and right by you. I hope that answer is kind of what you were looking for.
No, that's a perfect answer, and I think that wraps that up in terms of how you brought that round, because my next question to you was, how do you hold yourself accountable for the standards you have, as well as other people, including your players? And when you've held yourself in terms of that alignment, in terms of what you want and that expectation, when you feel that you've either fallen below it or you haven't achieved what you've set out to achieve, then that's how you're holding yourself accountable towards that. So whether you've gone in and had that hairdryer moment on the basis of an emotion that is raw from the game that has just happened, because you feel the expectation should have been higher, and therefore that's why your emotions are at that high state, because you felt that you could have achieved more within that game. You've then gone and sought advice from an assistant, sought feedback, and you've gone and seen someone who has seen you very emotional in that moment, someone who knows you away from that emotion, and someone who can be so honest with you to give you that feedback. Because when we go seeking feedback, it can be tough to get that off people, especially people we don't know. But if we got someone that we just have that comfortable level with, they're going to support us within that process of it. So I think when you hold yourself accountable towards that, that's an example of, yes, it doesn't have to be towards your playing principles, but does it align in terms of your expectations and values when it comes into the context?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the one thing that I've kept from the start this season, especially with the men's team, is, I always said this season was about development, and I've stuck to that. When we've been getting battered, I've still rotated the players, still played the minutes, because that's what I said at the start. And I think now going into this next season, I think there's so much more credit in the bank, and trust is the big word I use with the players, because that what I say is what I do. And I think that's so important, not just football, that's life. And the minute you come away from doing what you said, I think that's when you're going to you escalate more problems. And hopefully that can tie in with what you're asking there. How do I hold myself accountable? Well, like I said, I ask my peers, the people that I'm working with, but I don't just limit it to that, because I believe genuinely in a whole team culture. I'll go ask my goalkeeper, well, what's your thoughts? What did you think? I like to get different perspectives, because it's easy for the assistant manager, as much as I love him, he's great, but it's very easy for him to, in the moment, just agree. But he wasn't on the receiving end of it. How did it make those people feel? And I've got, something that I actually got from the Worcester City podcast. I think it was Jess, was it? And she talked about the leadership group at Worcester, and it's something I stole it from them. And I have like a little WhatsApp, and I just said to them on the night, like, your thoughts, be honest. And they always are honest with me, and I know they're being honest. And they again backed it up and said, no, it was exactly what we needed to hear. So again, but there's been other times I don't want us to look like I'm just talking about, it's always successful. There's been other times where I've asked for feedback and they've gone, well, actually, we felt like you needed to be a bit more assertive in that moment, and so there's been the other way, and it's helped me get better.
And just to build upon that, what Jess said is the huddle. So it is that leadership group which you've been able to take away from that practice. And it's great that you've been able to take that away from the podcast and someone else and then apply it to your context and how you approach that leadership model and then use it with your players. And then also talking about that high and low of that feedback and about how it can go two different ways. Because yes, you might always have that perception the feedback is positive, but sometimes it can be in trying to be the most constructive way. But at the time when you're in that raw emotion, is it going to be the right place to give that feedback within that moment? So it might need a week away from the pitch. You might need some time just to have a session and to chat about it. And it's all about that perspective and context which comes into it. And so when is that high emotional state and these different coaching styles we have, George, when you were coaching and you were on the sidelines with Chelmsford City, what was your sort of style like when you were with your players and when maybe the game didn't go the way you wanted it to go?
I think a big bit of it is belief, and you've got to be able to be. Again, it's another trait from football and life, I suppose. But I always try and drill into the players, be bold, take risks. And if it doesn't pay off, well, okay, we just try again, and keep drumming it in. Like, keep on trying, keep on going, and it will pay off one day. I mean, on the side, pretty calm, measure, try and see what's around, what's going on. It might be even Philippines to Finns, but you put it all into a picture and then you build on it. I suppose each week it's like fitting a jigsaw puzzle together. You find things that click and connect well, and there's other things that don't. But I think that's just a big part of, if you really feel that you want to, enjoy your games of football, go out there, no weight on your shoulders, enjoy it, but just be brave. If you can take risks there, take risks in life in a sense of good ones because it's like, I know this is a different analogy, but it's like you go to, if you want to go and ask someone out on a date, you might be a bit unsure, a bit, but you won't know without trying. The more times that you do it with someone or somebody else that you give it a go, if it works, then it's paid off. And then you can be very happy with the end result.
I love that analogy, and I love how you put that in terms of dating as well. Because I think, as I always say to my best mate as well, I say you could chat to this one girl, and she could be the girl you spend the rest of your life with, or you could end up chatting to her, and it could be right. That was just a one night sort of conversation. Nothing worked out, nothing came of it, and you'll never see each other again. And there's nothing wrong with that because all it took was that conversation to work out whether you're compatible or not, or as to whether your life is changing from that one moment, and is what's going to happen from it. And when it comes down to that approach in terms of that, be bold, be brave, that take that confidence, take those risks, and that is the values that you align, is that player development, that open approach, that friendliness, and building upon that. When you're in the changing room, then what ambience do you like? How do you like your change room to look then, George?
Just togetherness more than anything. That you want everyone to be on the same path, but then you're willing for others to contribute in. If as long as it don't get, like, I suppose, too messy in inverted commas, but as long as you try and get people's opinions, that's just as important because they're out there on the pitch. You're standing on the side. You put across what you want to, but then they might say some things that you don't see because you're not on the pitch, if that makes sense. So even if it's that extra bit of yard of space, there was people that used to say, "Okay, this is what we're doing, but why don't we just do a few extra yards of space, walk around the pitch in a sense? Don't be rigid to your positions, be a bit flexible, take them risks, find that bit of space. That extra bit of space could make a difference between us winning a game and losing a game." So it's just got to be unified. If there's someone I always used to drum into, and this is wherever I've been, even when I was back at my old secondary school, when I was doing lunchtime stuff with the like SEN students, which I found very rewarding. But for one thing that we always used to drill in was, right, okay, when you see each other, shake each other's hand. That shows that you've got respect for one another then. And if you can do that, then fantastic. And if people or participants there, or even with Ivory, Chelmsford, they used to come in and shake each other's hands. If they didn't, I'll say, okay, we'll start again. It's just about respect for one another, and that builds up hopefully a good, bond and comradeship. Then it's a good solid foundation to start on.
I really like that, and I like that foundation. That's something that I've always been big on, is shaking hands. So as soon as a player enters the pitch, I want either a fist bump or a handshake off them, and the same when they leave the pitch as well. I think it's that sign of respect of, the coach is here, the coach is set up, I'm here to turn up as well. So it just gives that vice versa relationship, and I think at the end it's a bit of a thankfulness. Thank you for playing for me, thank you for setting up the pitch, and it's just that gratitude and gratefulness from just a quick, a couple of second fist bump or handshake, and then even if you are going to go in for that, then it gives you an opportunity to have that conversation. So as a player enters a pitch, can we build upon that? So can we go and have that conversation, or what do you think of the game went on the weekend, or how's your day been, how are you feeling? And then just gives you that little catch up, and then maybe at the end of the session, or how has that session gone? So little things like that is how you get your coaching points in, but it's also those expectations and values. So there's two different ways of looking at it, but it's how you bridge it together as well. So I think I'm big on those foundations, and when I get young people in the score and they're perhaps dysregulated in their day, perhaps haven't woken or sleeping up, haven't sleeping well and woken up, great. And then they've come in, and then I'll start a conversation with them. Good morning, Joseph, how are you doing today? And they're just disgruntled, or they don't reply in the way that you want them to do. And I'm like, hello, sir, how are you? And then it's just change the context. Let's put a little bit of positivity on it, and let's start the conversation as we mean to go on, because I don't want to see you have a conversation that's going to be very negative, and then we're just going to focus on some of the negatives. So, all right, you didn't sleep great last night, or you didn't sleep great last night, your work's not that good. And then, getting into them, it's going, well, perhaps we could have made, perhaps you've done a really good piece of work here. When I see you next lesson, I want an even better piece of work, or perhaps we're just going to focus on just tweaking this here. And I think once you have that approach with the players that you have, that's what it comes down to. But Phil, for your ambience in the change room, how does that look for you?
I think the biggest thing for me is with the players is ownership, and that stretches to the dressing room. So giving them ownership of it. Of course, you have your sort of influences for myself as a leader. And generally, when I'm recruiting players or players wanting to come into our environment, I want to make sure they fit in. It's a bit of a FIFO. I'm sure you've heard of that, fit in or F off. And that's not meant in a, all right, sort of like a school be cool guy attitude or whatever. It's more fit in the sense of this is our culture. It's not macho, walk around the change room, I own it. It's very much a we're here together. This is a safe space to talk. And I think, of course, that's going back down the mental health route. But again, it's something that's happened in my life, and I don't tolerate people. I'm not saying there's loads of banter that flies around the change rooms, don't get me wrong, but it's a safe space for that, if that makes sense, and lines don't get crossed. And if they do, quite quickly it gets resolved. But generally, like I said, it's that ownership element of, they'll have the sort of music playing in there. But what I like about it is it stretches into the warm-up is the biggest thing I've noticed. And it's took time because we've had players leave because they didn't fit in with it. They didn't they didn't necessarily like the way that it wasn't all screaming and shouting. And, what it's about is what I wanted to create with every team that I coach is that environment where players essentially come away from it going, I absolutely love being here. I love being here. And that straight away, and I'll be honest, I've lost some very good players because they didn't fit in. And I've valued because I've thought long term. Short term, you'll win. You can go win what you want that way. But if you want to have a good long-term success, you need a changing room that's united, like Jordan said. And the way for me that you do that is by having people all on a similar mindset that want to play in a culture that is about, like you said, accepting mistakes, but not just football mistakes, accepting each other's mistakes. When someone might be late one day or someone's forgot to bring a certain bit of kit, whatever it is, that culture's there. On and off the pitch, you can make mistakes, and I think that's so valuable.
Absolutely, and I think that's it, Phil. Sorry, Luca.
No, carry on, mate. Go on, carry on. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, I think you're right. It's even principles in life. I mean, even like you say with lateness, that's one thing that, stamp right on that straight away. Because if that's what I always used to say to the lads, look, if one player is late, you're letting the rest of your team down. So obviously, all stand up and set by example, because you know we win together, we lose together, we're in it together. Just don't. I can't get my right words out that I'm trying to say, but that was a simple thing, like you say, with lateness, but it instilled that discipline in. And you've got to have that authority to do that as well. If someone is late, then you've got to, you know, not bring it up to the group as such, but you've got to make them aware that you don't tolerate that. Because otherwise, again, it can set off the example for the others. You've got to be very mindful. I think it's just it with coaching and management. There's so much to it, isn't there?
I find it really interesting because with lateness, when I first started coaching, I had that exact sort of mindset of you're not allowed to be late. But now I've come further on. For example, we have a fines wheel. I don't know if you've seen it on Twitter, Luca. I shared it on a Sunday share. We have like a fine spinning wheel. And if you're late, you have to do a spin of the wheel, and you can get any sort of punishment from making a silly animal impression in front of the dressing room to karaoke to doing some hot sauce. The lads decide it. It's brilliant, and watching it's hilarious. But it's got to the point now with this team that I don't worry about lateness. If someone's late, because they've created that culture with the fines wheel, they don't want to be late because they don't want to have to do the fines and do a silly animal impression. So it self-polices itself. And when they are late, I don't need to say anything because it's done for me. I don't, it only have to be when it's, say, 2 or 3 times in a row, because then I will pull them and say, look, this isn't a mistake now. It's a decision. If you do a mistake, if you do that mistake twice in that sort of time, you're deciding to go to bed late, or you're deciding not to leave enough time, or you're deciding to not have your kit ready. Whatever it is, we can all make mistakes once. That's or even I'm not saying necessarily over a season you might be late 6 times, but we have 52 fixtures / training sessions. I'd say 6 out of 52 isn't too bad. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying I'm right. For some people, it should be 52 out of 52, which of course is an ideal world. But that's my point. It's more 6 in a row. Okay, then we need to have that chat, of course. Probably less than that, like I said, 3. So I think it's just, for me, picking your battles, I suppose, in that sense. But equally, creating a culture, which I'm very lucky to have, which spawned from, and a massive shout out to the girls from Worcester for that, because I'm really appreciative of them sharing that huddle, like you talked about. We called it sort of the leadership group, but same thing. For me, now, like I said, with that ownership, those things are policed. Even everything's on there, kit, all sorts, everything. It's so good that they're kind of policing themselves. But what it also brings is camaraderie. It also brings sort of, like you say, laughter and all the things, culture, and it's just sort of this melting pot of success, if that makes sense.
I rate that though, big time.
I appreciate that. Thank you, George.
I like the way that you put that as well, the melting pot of success, because I think once you put all those elements in there, and the way that you say about those players policing themselves, that's from them, it's not you going in with a framework or guideline, that's from you going in with your accountability and standards, and then being able to apply those guidelines, especially when it's needed, because, when you want to hold players accountable, and I'm huge on punctuality like Jordan is, it's about how then we utilize it in different ways. So it's about how we all build upon it. So that wheel, that wheel that you talk of there, I think the spinning wheel, where it is an alternate defined system, where you're having that humor within it, as you said earlier on, I think just wraps around in terms of one of your values and principles about how you, even not building upon what you want in your sessions, but how you hold that value close to you in terms of how you manage your players, that relationship, what comes into it. And I think when it comes down to some of the expectations of players, one thing I used to say to my players is, if I'm early, you can be early. And that is a simple thing for me. And it's, some people might listen to this and go, you're towering everyone with the same brush. I understand different perspectives. You might have a single mum who's got 3 kids. One's a young baby. She's trying to get all 3 of them up ready out of the house and in time for training. Sometimes that's not always possible. And I completely understand that, but it's also about a player having that accountability. And as they get older, then they're going to go, actually, I need to get myself ready. I need to get on time for training. And it might be a case if they live down the road from training, the mum doesn't need to take them anymore, and they can just jog down or they're walking down. And it's one of those where they can be ready. And it's just how you have that conversation, just to stem something very little in them, which can grow over a period of time from a value that we hold closely.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I've got it already penned in with the lads on Spond. So before pre-season starts, the week before, I always do a meeting, and I'm quite lucky that I think it's about £12 or something. I can hire this little theatre at a school, It's amazing. And it's like a little theatre room with a projector and everything. And I always have a meeting at the start of the season. It's become a tradition because what it does is it sets out the principles, the sort of expectations of the club ethos. So especially for like new lads this season, they're going to be like, okay, this is what I'm coming into. And it's very much as simple as, like I said, if you want to be involved in this, be involved in it. We want you. But if this isn't for you, that's fine. We're not going to, there's no hate, there's no bridge burnt. If you change your mind in 6 months' time, whatever, you can come back. But on there and within it was, like you said, almost like a framework. I've never thought of it that way, but you're right. It was like my principles and everything I expect, which was on there, like you spoke about lateness, about the big thing for me is kit. I hate when kit's not matching. Really bugs me. But that was all on there. They took that, created a fines list, and then put it onto a wheel. And for me, like the fact that they did that, they asked me, of course, but they did that, and I just loved that I created an environment. It was, and this is the thing: people talk about winning trophies and everything, and don't get me wrong, I love winning trophies. That's what I'm in it for, like we all are. But that, just seeing that group do that off my beliefs and my sort of non-negotiables, if you want to call them, was the most satisfying thing in the world. And I imagine that, you know, for you, Jordan, in your roles, you've had them moments. I mean, I've listened to your podcast, I know you have. And of course, for you, Luca, in the teaching environment, them sort of light bulb moments, shall we call them. And yeah, I think that's one of the big reflections for all coaches should be, don't put all your value in the medals. You know, have the value, you know, see the value in the people growing as people. I don't know if you saw the tribute to Klopp yesterday. All the players, they put him in a room, sat him down, and had like a video montage of all players' clips. And the one that stood out for me, if you get to go back and watch, is Alisson. He didn't talk really about anything to do with him making a save or him getting goalkeeper of the year or whatever. He said he made me a better father, he made me a better brother, he made me a better mate. I think he used the word friend, sorry. And that just stood out for me out of all of them, because I just felt that to have that effect on him. He's won Champions League, he's won the Premier League, he's played for his country. But the thing that stood out to him was that I become a better person. And straight away, like, I already had so much, obviously, respect for Klopp. But that for me was just in volumes. There's something that I really tried to align myself to my whole life as a coach, is try to be there and help them develop as people as well. And by the sounds of it with Jordan and yourself, you're very similar in that sort of view.
Yeah, I think that you've hit nail on the head there. I mean, this is it though. As what you're saying, is it like with what you embroider, it sets a tone early on, and that's really good because it shows where I can't put my words out. Participants like, yeah, it makes them feel right. This is what we're expecting now.
Yeah,
you know. And as you say, I mean that with Klopp and that. I mean, I think this is it again. You hear all the pundits, Gary Neville, Jamie Carragher, everybody like that says, "Oh yeah, they're really good because they play a high press. They do this, they do that, they do this, and everything." Yeah, that's fantastic. But as you say, they don't look at the bigger picture of how they've helped a player like Alisson's case.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is now is because coaching is coming into this phase now where it's not so much of man management now, is it? It's more how everyone's brought up in their coaching
It's like the soft
DNA,
skills,
how
isn't
they
it?
like to play and that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Totally.
And just in reference to that clip, I know that I watched it, and even that he said he didn't realise how Adam Lallana felt until he watched that clip. And I think it's that importance which comes from it, and it's that piece where it's very important. And I know, George, that one picture of you holding your arms up, running into your players with your suit on. I love that picture of you, mate, because that just shows the same sort of impact that you have, and that you did when you had the relationship with those players in that period of time, and that moment is that huge aspiration all shining through, that commitment of the players and seeing what they've done on the pitch shine back through you, and then you're able to be excited, you're able to share those moments with your players. And I love that photo of you and the way you're just running at them. I think it's just a beautiful picture, mate.
Oh, thank you. No, I think I do appreciate that. You get to know each individual by an individual case. I mean, one of them with pictures with that goalie, I mean, shy as anything. Known him for fair few years actually, but he was one of them that, though he was shy, you needed to keep reminding him that you got this in the bag. You can do this. Believe in yourself. the rest will take over. And at first, there was mistakes, but it's just, you say to him, arm around the shoulder, okay, fine, we go again, no problem. You're going to make mistakes. In life, we're going to make mistakes. Perfection, we all crave perfection, really, in life, in football. But are we going to get it? Low would like to. The reality is a different matter. And I think we've got to, that's, if we can accept them for their mistakes, then they respond better to it as well, because it's a different coaching style. Instead of saying, oh, why did you do this for? Why did you do that? It used to be where it got to that stage where I was feeling that you just have to, I suppose you've got to have that stubbornness as well to keep saying to them and just drum it into them as much as you can, because that it'll pay off in the end. More times than enough, I've met people in football, particularly players, that just need that arm around the shoulder just to help them get to the next step. There's not many people that I've had to come across with that you have to literally shout in their face and get a reaction, if you know what I mean. And they're all in it for the same purpose, but they've just all got different characteristics, and it's just unlocking. It's like unlocking a padlock. And as soon as you unlock that padlock of a treasure box, say, you get your goodies.
I completely agree with you, and I think just to build upon what Phil said earlier on, and what you're saying, George, is when we got this sort of flip here, and this is from yesterday when the Liverpool coaches and Jurgen Klopp are leaving for the last time. It's that sort of sense of, look at that belief. I was able to put my arm around one of my coaches. Now he's off to go back into a head coach role. And even if you listen to Pep Linder's interview about how the way that he speaks about Klopp and what Klopp does to him, he gets very emotional in that interview. And that's on the basis of he was able to put his arm around him from a Klopp's perspective. And it's not only that, it's the way the players have felt from Klopp's impact, the way that they're responding to him, the way that the crowds are behind them. And this is an assistant coach here, literally getting a round of applause, the cheers from the crowd, even before the main man comes out. And I think that's not going right. I'm the main man, I'm the manager. That's a situation of someone who's brought his coaching team into this respect, into the values that he has, and putting them on the forefront. I know that we're talking about elite football here, we're talking about Premier League, but I think it represents and demonstrates the relationships which we can have with all the stakeholders about how we align everyone in terms of what Phil said as well earlier, and bringing this together in those values and the environment that you can create for your own player development, and you can support them just by putting an arm around them, by having a conversation, by holding them accountable, by holding yourself accountable, having that own coach growth development over that period of time.
100%. 100%. I think as well I always feel too that if you're wearing a badge, wear it with pride, because it's a privilege. Whatever background for community, whatever, you're wearing that badge with pride, and you want to embrace on that to bring togetherness. And it was when I was doing Ivory that when we was building up with that, yes, it was grassroots, but to have the sense where the community was on board, was wearing that badge, but the lads knew that the community was coming on board here, so we had to do something for them. It was a very unique ethos that was going around, but it was saying something when it came to that match when we was running up the pitch that over 500 people were there in attendance. Now that was just insane for people to come together and to witness that and to celebrate all together. It was just a moment that for me I'll always cherish. But for them lads that was out on them pitch, they made themselves heroes. And I still get messages like, it was literally about 9 years today that day happened, I think, if I remember the date right, for the year. But that still come to me now and say to me that day has brought a new person out in me, because I've been able to take this in life, that winning off the pitch, but we're taking it off the pitch now, and I'm winning in life as well because I'm building my own family. I'm having a full-time job. That makes it feel so good in itself, you know, and that's why, yeah, it's probably the best job that you can have.
I can't hear Luca. Can you hear Luca?
No, I can't hear Luca. I was going to say.
Oh, apologies. That's where I switched myself off to let you two speak. But I think it's when you talk about that 9 year later period, Jord, and how you bring that in and you're still receiving messages, it shows the importance and impact that you had with those players, that relationship which you still maintain. So even though you're away from the pitch, it's those relationships which still count, and those which are still remember those moments, remember what you had during those times. They'll remember what you said to them. And I think this quote from Klopp himself actually is quite fitting when you've said that. It's not important what people think when you come in. It's much more important what people think when you leave. And I think that's the case which you have right now. Even though you're out of football right now, people still think highly of you. People are still connected to you. People still know the value and time that you put in. And even it's the same when you're in those contexts as well, Phil, is even though you're coaching at many different environments with the women's, with the adult men, with the youth teams that you go in as well at times, it's what people think of you when you leave it. So when you're holding them accountable for those standards, and you may be just planting a seed and they're going to grow off it over that period of time when you're away from them, it's about how those people will remember you. And I think that's a very important perspective of when we approach our coaching philosophy, standards, values, however you want to describe it, when we're working with individuals.
Yeah, I think that's when we talk about reflecting, we talk about feedback. I think that's when you really see the honest feedback in some ways where it's indisputable. I think sometimes we can put out a survey or we can, like I said, talk to coaches. I'm not saying that is valuable in itself, but I think leaving them footprints for other people and you know, they almost miss you in a sense. I think that's the most important. Not miss you in the sense of need, but miss you in a sense of your presence and stuff. And you know, that's probably the most, well, for me anyway. I think for all coaches, when someone says, "Oh, the team miss you," or the team have really enjoyed having you there, especially when you've gone to a team where it's not your regular team, and done a bit of coaching, or just popped in or just covered or whatever it is. I definitely agree. I think that's the most pleasing and important feedback in a lot of ways, because a lot of the time it's almost milestone, especially for me. I've been with Kingfisher now 5 years. At some point I'm going to leave, and I just hope that when I do, that sort of whatever time it is, everyone talks to me. I don't, of course, we all want to be talked of as a great football coach, but the big thing that I want to be, people say I was a good person, and he had good morals and all those things. So, and I think that's the same for everybody, or I'd like to think so anyway. And like you said there with the Klopp quote, it's bang on. Like, how you leave is so important. And that's another reason why empowering people is important. Empowering those around you, so that when you do leave, you've left that place in that sort of situation, in a better place than you found it.
I completely agree, and I think that's very important about when that comes into it. And when you leave those places and you look at those moments and the impact that you've had, and when you evaluate and maybe reflect upon your impact as a coach, what you're doing this moment, what you're doing in this period of time, like we're 5 months already into 2024, and that's how fast time flies. So it's the same when we work with people as well, and those moments can suddenly be here and then they're gone before we know it. Like when we planned this episode, it was months ago, and suddenly we're here tonight chatting away. But what is one thing that you've done that you've been proud of this year, this month, this week? You can choose out of the three.
Myself, me, or Jordan,
yeah,
or both. Okay. I'm proud of. I had a player text me the other night. Our season finished Sunday. And he texted me. Basically, I put out a text saying, "Who's staying? Can you let me know by June 10th if you're staying on for next season or leaving? Just so you can plan, as we all do." And the text I got back was, "I'm 100% staying. Thank you for all the coaching you've done. I've come on as a player, but at the end of the message, he said, but the biggest thing is you've made me feel better as a person, and you've made me feel more confident in all of the areas of my life, and my family have noticed, and I can't thank you enough for that." And I can't lie, I was on my own in my bedroom where I am now, and I nearly had a tear in my eye, because I was in that place once as a player where I just felt I had no support. And one thing I really wanted to come out of my coaching and my management was that I care about you, and it's not just I care about you so I can get results. I care about you because I genuinely care about other people. And that text, because I didn't sort of instigate that feedback, meant the absolute world to me, more than anything I've ever won, more than anything I've ever earned money-wise. It just meant the world to me, and so that is my moment. I was so happy.
Such a lovely moment now, and the way that you receive it, and when you talk about a player and the way that they spoke about you, but able to reflect and understand the situation from where you've been before, but showing the impact that you've applied into your coaching and maybe what you didn't want to instill as a coach and what you are, just shows that reflection point. And now the importance and impact upon the person that you have, and it's much more than just what you're doing on the pitch. And I think that's so touching. George, what about you?
I think, I've had that as well, Phil, and it just leaves you feeling like speechless, doesn't it, mate? Because you don't know how to react in a situation like that. But it's just, I think, I suppose all my life myself, I've had doubters left, right, and centre. As I was saying to you in a podcast, Luca, where I had that teacher that was just bullying me day in, day out. But one thing he always used to say to me is, "You'll be no good for nothing because you're a failure." And that's one thing that he said to me then, and I was still young. And even though I carry that around with me now, I say up to myself, I can tell him to go and do one himself, like, because coaching's, having that impact on somebody's life it leaves you with a buzzing feeling. There's people that you see that you don't want to go through, for them to go through the same path that they've been left to the side and not being taken notice of or anything like that. There's one lad that I've known again for quite a few years now, but he was shy, knew he had talent, and he come through doing incredible things, not just as a footballer, but as an individual too. And from when I knew him, I suppose he's age 16, 17, and then to develop and then to build just I don't know, he was just a story in itself, because he come through from secondary school where I saw him in that club and I just knew there was something that he could do, that he could take ball by the ring and horns by whatever, what I'm trying to say. I'm talking gibberish. Ball by the horn, thank you. Right. It's literally where I saw a different side to Matt, and that's his name, Matt. But I saw a different side to him that I didn't expect to see, and he's come to me saying that, really grateful for what you've done for me. I've had it this last week where that goalkeeper that we was just talking about sent me a text last week saying, "Are you going to re-go with Ivory again?" Because what we had, something there was really special, and it was great to be part of it. And I'm so grateful that I was part of it, because it changed my life. And I look at that now, and I think with Scott Keeper's name, I just look at that and I think, yes, it was grassroots, but he's taken away so much from that. And that makes you feel so happy. It makes you feel, I've done my job, you know? He's, it just makes you feel like, whoa. So with that, in a pride moment, just anyone that's themselves that have knuckled down, but have themselves that have developed and put the graft in. There's so many individuals that I could say I'm proud of because they've done so well for themselves.
I love that, mate, and I think that's so important in terms of how you say go on and talk about that. Phil?
Sorry, what proud moment?
Yeah, just if you were going to say anything about the Jordan, I know
sorry.
I'm just conscious of that.
I had more of a question, if that's all right, Jordan.
Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah, of course.
So I remember you saying about you doing like public speaking. I'm not sure how much more you've done. I remember you said you went into like sixth form and stuff. Has that been again really powerful for you in terms of reflection and feedback in the good, in sort of the good that you're doing in your community? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's putting belief back into the community because I mean, through education at the sixth form, there was a lot of students that come to me after the talk and said, I don't know how I can get across this to my tutor. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, I don't even know how I can ask them for help. And I say, well, this is the thing. If you can't ask your tutor for help, it's nothing to be ashamed of. But what's the worst that can happen? It's not like going to turn around and say, if they just say to you, well, I can't help you, I can't help you. But you've taken, again, that bravery to ask for that help. And I think that goes for all around, not just college, that doesn't just go for football, but even us men, on a mental health perspective, hopefully that if we can reach out and say, we need help at any point in life, then that's got to be commended and praised, and say, right, that's really well done. But I think with the public speaking, it has definitely, I mean, it was just really weird. When I say really weird, in a good way.
Yeah.
Because it was a different door and people were saying to me, oh, okay. And there was a few students that fed back to their tutor and said, I want to look into coaching now on the sports side. And again, that made me feel really good to hear that,
Yeah.
I think it's that impact that you continue to have now and sharing those moments and experiences where if you want those to go off and consider coaching or maybe go into it, they've been able to listen to the great moments that you had and they want to replicate what you've been able to do. And just that story where you've been able to share with them, whether it was for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever, but just sharing that has really helped and inspired them and takes that to the next level. And I think that's the basis of what's come out of this conversation tonight is inspiring others, having an influence on them, leaving a mark, planting that positive seed and allowing them to bloom off it and take the opportunities which are presented in front of them from a long-term standing of the impact that we have on them as coaches and individuals. That is much more than football, but football brings us together through these people relationships.
Totally agree, Luca. Yeah.
Well, boys, it's been a great conversation. I am considerate that it's 8:30 on a night and the conversation could keep going for hours. But something I wanted to do as an arrival activity with you both, but something which the conversation just got us going and flowing straight away. So I flipped it around in terms of the cool down activity now rather than the arrival activity. So I'm going to start with Phil. It's going to be 30 seconds. And how many top coaching tips can you give in 30 seconds? So I'll count you down in 3, 2, 1.
Preparation is so important. Make sure you're there early. What else? Communication, massive. That look into that yourself. 30 seconds. Take pride in your work. Always give everyone a chance. That's a big one for me. Don't ever turn someone away. At least give them a platform. I'm trying to think what else is important. There's so much. Education, but education to experience. Don't let it just be education. Use it. Even if it doesn't feel comfortable, that's probably a good thing if you don't feel comfortable. Last thing, believe in the players and believe in yourself and be true to yourself.
Perfect, not bad. 36 seconds, but a lot of coaching tips within that. So I know it's completely fine. I think that's brilliant. But when you cover so many coaching tips within that, I think when someone can take away 1 or 2 from there and 1 or 2 from Jordan, for example, it's then how can they build on some coaching tips for themselves to keep taking that forward. Now, Jordan, you're on the hot spot yourself now, and I'm going to count you down the same as I've done with Phil, so you can pinch some off him, but hopefully you can replicate some from your time as well. So in counting in 3, 2, 1, you're in, Jordan.
Yeah, I agree with Phil what he said, but inclusiveness is a big one. Bringing everyone together, regardless of what walk of life. Togetherness, win together, lose together, be part of the group together. consistency as well, I think, is key. As long as you stick to that, with whatever your plans are, don't change. Be true to yourself, as Phil says, really.
Spot on, mate. 32 seconds. So, and when you look at that as well, in terms of timing, in terms of how many coaching tips you've covered, I think it just shows the experience which you two both have, as well as that values of coaching which are both within you. But I really liked what you said, building on top of Phil's, George, and just putting inclusivity in there. I think that's one that can be missed at the best of times as well. So I think it's really important about how we include others, that human element towards it, building upon those relationships and making people feel very welcome within that environment. So when I've been jotting down so many notes over the course of tonight and looking at some of the points which are going to wrap up from tonight, the list is massive in terms of just some of the points which we've touched upon. And I'm going to send the questions over to you both later, but I sort of had some questions which I didn't share with you prior to the conversation because I wanted to guide the conversation in different ways. But we've sort of covered the majority of them in different ways just by exploring a conversation. So I think it's kudos to the both of you, because I think once you share and have these experiences, it just covers how many different topics we have, like we have done tonight. But it has been so great to catch up with you both again and to record a second episode of this new series. But again, your time is appreciated. Honest, it's brilliant to have these authentic relationships, and just for reaching out for one another, this connection and reflective circle is the most genuine reflective circle to be brought together. So I really appreciate it, boys, especially on a Monday night at 20 to 9. So hopefully you can have some downtime before tomorrow comes. But I really do appreciate it, and I have been looking forward to it all day. And I'm glad that you two have taken the floor and has made tonight truly count and brought another wonderful episode and more content.
That sounds good. Definitely. Thank you, Luca. And I think another big thing as well is enjoy the ride. Make the most of every opportunity. Any opportunity comes up, take it. You never know what comes around in life. And on top of that, mine's got that, but yeah, just enjoy the occasion. Make the most of every opportunity, because as Ricky Gervais says in Afterlife, life is precious because you can't watch it again.
Yeah, definitely. No, I appreciate both your time. I've absolutely loved it. I took a lot away myself, which is brilliant, and really hope we can get that meet up at some point. It'd be really good to, do it in person. But again, massive thank you, Jordan. You're a really inspiring individual. To have the chance to be on this pod with you, obviously I've been on the pod with Luke before, but again, it still stands. It's an absolute pleasure and honour. So thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you, Luke, and thanks, Phil, as well. You've really inspired me tonight as well, and cheers, I think you're a top coach, and you're going to really flourish. I can see it, mate.
You too, mate. And if you ever need a job, let me know. You can call me coach my team. It's a bit of a commute.
Top man. Thank you. And likewise, when I'm back in it.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, boys. Cheers.
Love it. Today, everyone.
Thanks, Luca.
But yeah, we try to be that group that can help be there for the players as a three, because I think you mentioned earlier, you want to have different characters in the changing room. You want to have different personalities. You don't want the same kind of people, because you're not going to be able to move forward. If you've got 10 people and they all agree the same things, you're going to get to a point in time where actually you're going to become unstuck. You need that one person to actually be like, nah, I don't agree with that. Or actually, we should try this. And I think that's why the huddle works, is we're all quite different as human beings. And I think you need 3 different people in there, because some players will naturally gravitate towards me and my personality, but equally some might go to the other 2, and that's absolutely fine.